Hi guys, this is gsno.com and I'm here with a review of the POCO F4. We've already unboxed and reviewed the POCO F4 GT and the POCO X4, and now it's time for a mid-range handset which can handle gaming quite well. So the POCO F3 last year was my first recommendation for anybody who asked me I want a mid-range gaming phone. Now this one steps in the same footsteps, but it keeps the same Snapdragon 870 processor, improved cooling, stereo speakers and faster charging at 67 watts. It has, I would say, a rather large battery, an AMOLED screen with narrow bezels and 120Hz refresh rate, and we're about to find out if it's a worthy successor to the POCO F3 or not. Okay, so the price is $400 and we're starting with the design. There is glass at the front side with pretty narrow bezels and one of the smallest punch holes I've seen for the selfie camera. And we also have glass at the back side and a plastic frame in between. It measures 7.7 millimeters in thickness and weighs 195 grams, and it comes in silver, black or green. The back side is, I would say, rather frosted with this concentric ring effect, but it does draw some fingerprints and grease here and there, so we're lucky enough to have a case in the box to protect it. It even has some IP53 certification for dust and water resistance, and up front you have Gorilla Glass 5 protection if you really must know. I would say that the grip is fine on account of the flat frame, however the device is quite wide and quite long for single hand portrait usage. It's also not, I would say, not as good looking as the predecessor, however it's distinguished by the unique design of the camera area, unlike what we're seeing these days on other phones. Now, as far as the screen is concerned, the display you're seeing right here, well, this one is an AMOLED 6.67 inches, Full HD, and it's largely similar to the predecessor. It has 120Hz refresh rate, it has HDR10 Plus support, Dolby Vision, and up to 1300 nits of brightness. We also have a screen protection in the box, small bezels and a small punch hole, but you already saw that before. Now, I've already prepared for you a YouTube clip which will let you properly enjoy the quality of the screen. Now you can immerse yourself in the clip, and as you can see the bezels aren't very large. We have here some pretty bright images, so the screen is bright, it's pretty crisp, it has deep blacks and wide view angles. The contrast is solid even in full sunlight, and the colors, although vivid, I feel are less vivid than I've seen on other AMOLEDs out there, to be honest. Sometimes they may feel just slightly washed out. Even though in this case what you're seeing here looks rather vivid, I've seen better on other handsets with AMOLED panels. Now, other things. So, we have here a pentile matrix pixel arrangement, and when it comes to the brightness, we have the measurements here on our sister site, and we achieved with the POCO F4 556 lux units. Just so you know, the POCO F3 was brighter, around 600, but we surpassed the Samsung Galaxy A53 and the Vivo V23, as well as the OnePlus Nord 2T. We have quite a few options to tweak in the settings department. As usual for a Xiaomi or Xiaomi related phone, brightness, reading mode, refresh rate, which can be set to default or custom, and you can select 60 or 120 Hz, and a large variety of color options, including vivid, saturated, original, and a whole array of settings here in the advanced area department. Quite a few of them. I would say that some people may actually feel confused by this large amount of options. Now, going further, what we have here is, well, it's time to talk about the CPU. Qualcomm Snapdragon 870, in spite of what it says here, even though it's actually not very wrong, because the Snapdragon 870 is an 865++. 7nm octa-core, also found on the POCO F3, Moto G100 and Vivo X60 Pro, plus the Xiaomi 12X. It's accompanied in the current case by 6 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM and 128 GB of storage, UFS 3.1 if I'm not mistaken, and a larger cooling area than the POCO F3. No microSD sadly, but also no lag and no problems with overheating. However, when you initially boot up the device, after every boot or reboot, there will be 1 minute or so of, well, sluggish functioning. Now, when it comes to the benchmarks, we have some here, also on our sister site. In Antutu 9, as you can see, we surpassed the flagship Huawei P50 Pro, which is no small feat, and we also beat the OnePlus Nord 2T. In Antutu 8, we're just above the OnePlus 8T, beating the Motorola Edge 20 Pro and also the Motorola Edge 30. We are below the POCO F3, be advised, below the Xiaomi 12X with the same CPU. Geekbench 5 multi-core shows us a value superior to the Galaxy S21 Fan Edition 5G and superior to the Xiaomi 12X, which is not bad. Still, below the POCO F3 and below the Moto G200. In 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme ES 3.1, we had great expectations and we just surpassed the Xiaomi Mi 11, OnePlus Nord 2 and Galaxy S21, which is actually not that bad. We did stay below the POCO F3 and the Xiaomi 12X plus the Vivo X60 Pro. So basically, it can handle other devices with a similar processor and even some older flagships. Now, as far as the temperature is concerned, we go here. We reach 43 degrees Celsius when it comes to benchmarks, which is quite high, but in games it stayed at a more decent 32.9 degrees Celsius. Now when it comes to the battery, we have here a 4500 mAh unit, and it's nice to see that it charges at 67 watts. The predecessor only charged at around 30 or 33 watts. Okay, so battery tests, here we are. The first one is the video playback test. We achieved 15 hours and 6 minutes. To be honest, I've seen better. It's above the ROG Phone 5S and above the Galaxy S21 Fan Edition, but below the POCO F3, which had 16 hours and 47 minutes. It's also below the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G and the Xiaomi 12X. In PC Mark, things are looking a bit better with almost 14 hours, better said 13 and 57 minutes. It's above Galaxy S22 Ultra, POCO X3 Pro, Moto G100 to name just a few. It's below the OnePlus Nord 2T and the POCO F3, which had 15 hours and 18 minutes. The charging is, I would say, satisfying at 45 minutes, and after just half an hour, you're at 85%. Not bad. On the acoustic side of things, we do not get an audio jack, but we get a bundled adapter from USB-C to 3.5mm. We have stereo speakers here, this is one of them, and this is not the second. We don't use the earpiece, we use these two slots here, or better said, these two holes here. Okay, so to get things going, I have to mention that I have a Dolby Atmos option in the settings, and here's what the audio sounds like. Okay, so it's pretty clear that the bottom speaker is doing all the heavy lifting, while the top one, well, probably takes care of the high notes and mids. Now, the actual experience is, I would say, there's not much distortion here unless you listen to rock music, that's what I noticed. Also, not a record-breaking volume, except for video games. The bass is underwhelming, the case vibrates a bit, and I would say that the highs and the mids are more satisfying than the bass. The voice was fine in an Eminem tune, just to name an example. And it's also very easy to cover this one with your hand when gaming. Now, we have some tests here related to the power of the volume. At the bottom, with an acoustic sample test, 77.6 decibels. At the top, 85.7, so it's clear. Well, I think it's actually the other way around, excuse me. So at the top, 77.6 decibels, this one. And at the bottom, it's actually 85.7. As I said before, the bottom one is doing all the heavy lifting. Now, with the result we achieved at the bottom, we surpassed OnePlus Nord 2 and the Samsung Galaxy A53, but we scored below the Motorola Edge 30 and below the Xiaomi Mi 10T. In gaming, we achieved 98.4 decibels. We expected a bit better here, but it's okay. It's above Samsung Galaxy A53 and also something like the Realme 9 Pro Plus. Below the OnePlus Nord 2 and below the Motorola Edge 30. Now, camera-wise, let me go to a white background so you can see just how small the punch hole for the selfie camera is. A 20 megapixel shooter with a Sony sensor and a fixed focus, and if you go to the back side, we have a triple camera array with this main sensor. It's a 64 megapixel OmniVision sensor with optical image stabilization and face detection autofocus. It combines 4 pixels in one and takes 16 megapixel shots. Then we have the 8 megapixel ultrawide camera and the 2 megapixel macro camera, which takes macros at 4 centimeters. Be advised, POCO F3 had a 5 megapixel macro camera. We also have 4K 60 frames per second video capture and a ton of options in the camera interface. I think it's time to go to the gallery. It was taken by a colleague of mine, so we can analyze the shots here. First of all, the daylight ones. Now the selfies I would say are quite fine for a mid-range phone. Somehow they reminded me of the Xiaomi 11T, if you remember that model. Nice separation of the foreground and the background with the bokeh. Nice facial expression, but you can tell it's fixed focus. You don't see a lot of pores of the skin and a lot of details. On the small screen, they may appear like a lot of details, but on a larger screen you see it's a mid-range affair. You can also apply some cute effects if you really want to. It is important to remember the quality of the selfie camera matters if you're streaming games, because it's a gaming phone after all. Now the main camera, I'm happy to inform you that there aren't big color differences between the main camera and the ultra-wide one, so it keeps pretty much the same color calibration. I also have to say that the zoom is just decent. We're lacking a telephoto camera, but at around 3x is, well, decent electronic zoom. The colors are quite satisfying here. I didn't notice any overexposure, just a lot of quantity of light captured by the camera. That's something I noticed, but the colors are actually nicely represented. Okay, let me go further. One area where the phone excels is definitely the close-ups. So we have quite a few of them, all of them satisfying in details, texture, and of course, color. We go further here. I'm loving those greens. It's one of the few phones below $500 which doesn't oversaturate the nature, I mean the greens of the vegetation in the full sunlight. Once again, very nice close-ups. And of course, I'm talking about the main camera close-ups, not the macro one, which frankly were better on the POCO F3. Okay, so even more colors here on a children's playground. Excellent texture here. We can tell which is metal, which is wood, which is plastic. So we circle through them and we find that the color of the sky is a bit unrealistic, but the other colors are quite spot on. So in the end, my impression stays the same. It's close to the Xiaomi 11T, and I'm happy with everything minus the lack of zoom, and also I would say that there's a bit of extra lighting captured by the cam. Now when it comes to the low light, we have the shots here. I feel they're a bit warmer than usual. The ultra-wide camera is a bit of a letdown on account of its shots being too dark, and when you capture light sources, they will be a bit over-exaggerated, as you can see here. However, the contours of the people were very well represented. This is an ultra-wide failed shot. The street lights are a bit too big for my taste and for reality. However, check out the details here. You can actually see the LEDs. You can see the LEDs of the logo Catena here, so that's nice. In low light, it handles it perfectly, except for the time you're using the ultra-wide. In regular shots, it's fine, except for the fact, as I said before, that every once in a while, the image feels a bit warmer than it should be. Other than that, I'm pretty happy of its performance. Once again, if you're taking into account a mid-range phone below $500. Okay, now let's talk video. Now, as far as videos are concerned, there's a bit of overexposure here, as you can see, and the greens are too intense, the greens of the vegetation, but the stabilization is quite fine. What I love the most about the filming that the phone does is the level of detail. I can definitely say for certainty that at 4K 60 frames per second it has the same details as a flagship phone. Now when it comes to stabilization, it's a bit reactive, so you're going to feel its move to compensate for your movement. Okay, so we have this clip here, definitely a 4K one, a lot of detail, but being 4K 60 frames per second, obviously the stabilization will suffer. If you want proper stabilization, stick it to Full HD or even 4K 30 frames per second. Lovely colors, by the way, lots of detail, and I actually feel that the exposure and white balance of the 4K videos is superior to the Full HD ones. Okay, we also have a selfie video, which is, I would say, mid-range, on par with the Xiaomi 11T, just as I compared the whole photo camera section with it. Decent for mid-range, but not more than that. We also have a focus test, alternating between foreground and background. I would say passed with flying colors. And finally, we should probably also mention something a bit more colorful and detailed, like this one here, where there's actually no overexposure and no problem with the greens, where there's actually satisfying stabilization. So all around, it's one of the good mid-range phones when it comes to filming. maybe even better than the Xiaomi 11T. Now, this has been the daytime. Let's see the low light. Traditionally a challenge for most phones, as you can see, slightly orange, slightly pink, definitely warm colors during the nighttime, and a bit of a flicker here of the quantity of light. However, once you start working, you'll see that the stabilization is actually not that bad. Okay, what about done? Just a notch above the typical mid-range phone, and when it comes to connectivity, the device will provide you with an infrared emitter here at the top side to control your TV set, USB-C 2.0 port, there's NFC, there's dual nano SIM card slots, there's Wi-Fi 6, 5G, Bluetooth 5.2, GPS, Galileo, GLONASS, BDS, QZSS and Navic, and the calls were loud and clear. Now we also did a bunch of speed tests, and let's see how those panned out. So you can definitely see that it's quite a solid Wi-Fi connectivity here. We reached 721 megapsecond in download, 776 megapsecond in upload, that's Wi-Fi. On 4G, we reached 468 over 34.5 megapsecond download and upload respectively. Now, when it comes to the software, this is MIUI 13 on top of Android 12 with some POCO elements to it. Sadly, no privacy dashboard and none of the new widgets. We just have the typical ones and some POCO infused ones, which you can see here. We have the news section here from Google. We have the two columns for the recents. We have the control center with the quick settings separated from the notification area. We have the app drawer with the categories and all the typical settings you've seen on a Xiaomi phone, including always on display, passwords and security, digital well-being, and a bunch of special features, including a sidebar. For security, we're using the fingerprint scanner inside the power button, which is not very fast, but it's quite accurate, as you can see for yourself. And I think we've left the gaming for last. So if I'm going to enter Asphalt 9, I can also trigger a special menu here, part of the game turbo experience. You can clear the memory, free up storage, monitor performance. You can also activate the do not disturb feature, record, use a bunch of settings, turn off the screen, and even change your voice to make the recording funkier. By the way, Asphalt 9 is celebrating 4 years of existence, so there may be some bonuses. Now, aside from that, there is the famous security app, which is a hub for the phone's well-being, a bit of bloatware here and there, and even some ads in some applications. That's about it. I still maintain that this is a gaming phone, a mid-range gaming phone. This is the game turbo area. You actually have your profiles for the games, and you can actually do a bunch of tweaks to your experience, because there are quite a few options to use, even some related to performance, which will make you avoid overheating. When all said and done, this has been the experience of the POCO F4. Its biggest rival is probably the POCO F3. On the Pro side, we have a bright screen, a powerful processor, a good gaming experience, and also a pretty good bottom speaker when you come to think about it. The cooling is quite fine, and I would also have to say that I love the fact that we have IP53 certification here. That's always a plus. Now, aside from that, I also like the fast charging. The battery is quite okay in my book. And I should also probably mention that the stabilization was fine when filming, and the selfies were decent. Now, I also have to mention on the Pro side of things, the close-ups, the colors in general in photos and videos, and the details of the 4K capture. Those are the pros. On the cons, well, the top speaker is a bit of a bummer. It's a chunky phone with lots of angles, straight angles. The ultra-wide camera was a bit of a letdown, and so was the macro camera, which is actually underpowered compared to the predecessor one. The greens felt a bit intense in photos and videos. I'm talking about the greens of the vegetation. And at the same time, I should probably also mention that in some areas, it feels like a bit of a downgrade from the POCO F3, which is obviously a bit cheaper. In the end, it's a phone that competes with the Samsung Galaxy A53 and the Motorola H30, and it beats them in performance and a few other aspects. What it does not beat is the, well, POCO F3, which is superior because its screen is brighter, it's prettier looking, it has more battery life, It even stays cooler in some regards and louder as far as the bottom speaker is concerned in some aspects. So there's that, there you have it. This is the POCO F4. Be careful what you choose. Some people may recommend the POCO F3 and they have all the right to do that. However, this one may end up being more future-proof because it may receive software updates a bit faster. So the POCO F4 is indeed a, well, gaming phone, and the biggest upgrade from the POCO F3 is the camera, I would have to say. Other than that, the gaming experience will feel similar and the cooling may be better, but I felt that the two are pretty much the same in most regards. That's it from us. This has been the review of the POCO F4. Judge wisely and buy wisely. Goodbye.